Thank you for tuning into the Devy Devotional Podcast, a monthly show focusing on Devy prospects, strategies, and incoming rookies. Now here's your host.
Welcome into the Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy, if I could actually talk. Jeez, that was bad. All right. I'm your host, Dynasty Coach A. As always, I'm joined by Aaron Wilcox at Aaron Wilcox 86. Tonight we're going to be talking about, we're going to be drafting some risers and fallers. We've only had a handful of games so far, but some big changes have happened to the top guys. Some guys that we thought were going to break out have or haven't. And so today we thought we'd switch it up a little bit rather than just talking about the guys that we love and everything. We're actually going to be drafting a team, and then we're going to post on Twitter, and you guys can vote on it and let Aaron know why I won. But why don't we go ahead and bring Aaron on and see how he is doing today?
I'm doing really fun. This idea is just a super fun one. It's still very useful for the listeners out there. But I saw DLF adopt a similar strategy on one of their pods, and definitely something cool to incorporate on the Devy side. So excited about this list, and I'm doing well. I had a good weekend, got out for some duck hunting as I was sharing with you, and it's just nice to get outside a little bit. So, but yeah, pretty pumped up with enough sample size where we can start drawing some conclusions as well from this college season. I mean, the door is not shut on anybody or vice versa. It's not closed necessarily, but at least we have enough data where we can start making some conclusions versus like the extremely small sample size of 1 or 2 games.
Exactly. Troy King wants to know if we were going to talk about Beth. That's all I do, baby. That's all I do. That's going to be half the show right there. But speaking of Beth, I've been diving into all of these, all of this data and everything from the first 4 weeks. And like you said, it is a small-ish sample, but it's big enough to where we can start getting, gleaning some info and everything. But I will say, there's some teams that have still only played like shit teams, and then there's other teams that have played 2 or 3 top 20 teams, and so it is hard to like compare apples to apples, but I think we have enough to where we can go, okay, this guy's standing out even if it's against lower level competition, that kind of thing. I have a guy that we'll get into a little bit later on probably, that I'm like, man, he is just completely standing out, but the level of competition hasn't been the greatest, but I still have him on my list just because I think it's enough to where his name needs to be on, in people's mouths. So we'll go ahead and dive into the risers here. The way that we discussed it is, it's not necessarily the top players. It's not the middle players or whatever. It's the people or the players that have moved up the most, gained the most value here. So it could be a guy moving from 5 to 2. It could be a guy moving from 500 to 200. It just really depends. But obviously moving from 5 to 2 is still a pretty substantial jump. And then obviously moving up 300 spots would be an insane jump. So we'll go ahead and dive in here. I'm going to let Aaron start off with the 101. It was his idea. And then I'll take the 101 for the followers. Let him have a slight chance at winning here. But who are you taking for 101 with your risers so far through the 4 weeks of the 2022 season?
Yeah, so with the 101 of the all breakout, all riser team, I'm going to go with Raheem Sanders, running back, Arkansas. And this was a tough selection, don't get me wrong, but he has just risen up as far as being a stud this season, 4th in the nation in rushing yards, and his scoring could be even higher for us fantasy players in the CFF and C2C community if he had more than the 3 rushing touchdowns. So he's getting a large opportunity at Arkansas. He's showing why he was a good recruit coming out, and he has receiving versatility. So I really like what he's done. And as far as what makes him relevant as a riser or breakout, it's just because there was some uncertainty in that class, whether the top guys were going to stay the same as Travion and then maybe Braylon Allen, like who else maybe would be vaulting into that spot. A lot of people like Will Shipley, a lot of people like Donovan Edwards. It seems Raheem Sanders has leapfrogged those guys, at least at the moment. And he has a very good case for even RB2 in the class, just because Braylon Allen, we know he's good, but can he even function as a pass catcher? What is his top end athleticism? Those will be questions for Braylon Allen. Really like what Raheem Sanders has done. So that's my 101.
Yeah, I already admitted that I was wrong about Raheem Sanders. I thought that he was just kind of a plotter based on what I saw from, last season, albeit in a small sample. But that's kind of why we don't like to go off of small samples. But unfortunately, that's all we had. I didn't see a lot of big plays. I didn't see a lot of points scored. I didn't see a lot of anything. And then, I went and saw him live at the Outback Bowl in Tampa against Penn State. And nothing, it wasn't exciting. Unfortunately, there really weren't a lot of like studs at that game because everyone had opted out. But it kind of like confirmed my biases that I didn't see anything special. I didn't see it in the numbers. I didn't see it live in person or anything like that. And so I just was just out. I was wrong. I mean, I was never out. I had him a lot lower than most people. So I was never going to get him in a draft. And if you were following that particular advice, you were definitely not going to get him either. So I was wrong about that. I do think that he's going to be a great addition to the 2024 class. The only thing that gives me the slightest little bit of pause, and it's one game, but once again, we're dealing with a small sample size. This last game against Texas A&M, he only had 68 rushing yards on 17 attempts. Didn't do much in the receiving game either. So, you look back at some of the games, like he blew up against Missouri State. FCS team, right? 167 yards rushing, 75 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns. Then Texas A&M, 17 rushes, 68 yards, 4 yards per carry, no receptions, no receiving yards, no touchdowns. It's a little concerning, but it's one game. He also did very well against South Carolina. Now, South Carolina is not amazing, but it is an SEC team and everything. So I still have him much higher than he was last year. But that one game gives me a little bit of pause. So I actually had him a little bit lower on the list than 101. I probably would have had him around 103, something around there. So, I'm already just winning. Value game, all that kind of good stuff.
Right. You're exposing my reaches right away in this draft, John. Oh, well done. Let's see who you have at 102.
It's the only one. It's the only player that you could ever have at 101. It's my baby. It's Drake May. He came on the scene hot. I've been all about him ever since I even found out who the hell he was. 5-star prospect. Aaron didn't think he was going to get on the field. He's on the field. Not only is he doing that, a very nice 69% completion rate, 1,231 passing yards, 11.7 adjusted yards per attempt, 16 touchdowns to 1 interception, 39 rushes for 102 yards and a rushing touchdown. And what's even more impressive to me is half of those stats are without Josh Downs in the lineup, without his top receiver in the lineup. He's played lower level competition, he's played higher level competition, and he's done great in all of it. I think, even if he ends up playing some more difficult teams or more difficult competition in the future, I still think that there's room for him to drop down and still be one of the best. As of right now, small sample, albeit, as of right now, I have him in that top tier of guys. The top tier QBs, because that's just the way he's playing. He looks like he is going to be an amazing QB with a little bit of rushing ability. He's not going to be Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, or anything like that. But he has the ability to move around in the pocket, escape when he needs to, that kind of thing. And if we can get Josh Downs healthy and back at it, I think that they can really be special. Because I know for you weren't ever really out on the player. It was more, can a UNC QB be a first round pick, that kind of thing in the actual NFL draft. If he plays like this, I don't think there's any question. There's no doubt he's going to be a first round pick if he continues playing like this.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it there. I think you had a great call coming into this season, and I was too low on him. So definitely a guy who's moved up for me and was in consideration at the top of this draft. So well done, and I'm excited to see the rest of the season with Josh Downs. Those guys are going to have some great chemistry, put up some great weeks, and hopefully he does what Sam Howell couldn't do, right? So, yeah, great selection there at the 102. I know I'm supposed to be tearing down your picks here, right? It's a competition, but I do like it.
I love it. I love it. Well, yeah, let's go ahead and hear if I fall in love with your 103 here.
I'm going to steal your baby here. Quinshawn Judkins, Ole Miss,
No.
running back. Yep, true freshman coming in, being more productive than Zach Evans, who's this top 3 back in the 2023 class. Like what? And part of that, of course, with context, is that Zach Evans has been banged up a little bit. He missed time in the most recent game, but that doesn't matter. Quinshawn Judkins has been steadily involved every game of the season so far. And this guy's just a future stud that us Devy managers need to be aware of. If you're in a deeper league, you probably didn't draft him, right? You probably didn't get him in your deeper C2C leagues and those rosters, but in Devy leagues, he'll probably still be available for you in your draft next year. And this guy's just going to continue to rise, even if he falls off a little bit during the season. He's just a huge breakout player from this early season. What he's doing is really great. He's 13th in the nation in rushing yards, I believe, and he's workhorse size back. And I get he wasn't this amazing recruit, but he was no slouch either. And I really liked his high school tape. It was one of those deals where I wasn't totally buying into the fact that they would actually use him. I thought he was going to be kind of just put to the bench most of this season, and what he's done is eye-opening. So that is my 102. That's Quinshawn Judkins.
Yeah, I had him. I had him right up here. I can't be mad about this one. I'm not even gonna talk down about it or anything because he's been amazing as a true freshman, and it's just what you love to see. But I think that is a great pick. I have him. Let's see. He's moved into my top 24 for all overall Devy running backs already through 4 weeks, and I discount it. Actually, we talked about it a few days ago. I was like, I've moved some of these guys up pretty high, and I'd been playing with like how much I should weight like amount of games played in the model, and I felt like it was a little too low, and so I moved up. Like I made the lower the games, obviously, like it hurts your value even more. So like he would have been even higher, but because he's only played 4 games, I was just like, you got to do a little bit better, or you got to have a stronger sample size before I'm really going to fall in love. But the fact that he's already moved into the top 20, top 24 is definitely a great sign. And I'm going to talk about big time run rate quite a few times tonight, and I've talked about it quite a few times on our pod, and I love the fact that he has a 9.9% big time run rate. That shows explosiveness, that shows athleticism, and all the things that you love to see from a true freshman. So I love the 103 pick there. And for me, I'm going to go ahead and kind of cheat here, but not really. I'm going to take Emeka Egbuka. I think that it's kind of cheating because he was already very high up, but like there was highly touted Devy analysts that did not have Emeka Egbuka in their top 12 for Devy wide receivers at the beginning of the season 4 weeks ago. So I think that now it would be impossible for any of those people to be like, oh, he's not in my top 12. And if anything, he's moved into my top 3. So I'm falling in love with him. I still have him higher than Marvin Harrison Jr. And that might surprise people. But just the things that he's done, I mean, he's 472 scrimmage yards, 17 yards per reception. This is for his career. The 472. No, I'm sorry. That is this year. 472 scrimmage yards, 17 yards per reception, 6 touchdowns, a 32.6% market share, 3.91 yards per team pass attempt, and 3.6 PPR points per touch. Those are all like through the roof. Now it's only 4 weeks, but and JSN's not there. He's not playing, which sucks because I really wish that he was. Maybe it happened because of that, but there's no way that they can put the genie back in the bottle. Like that's just not happening. So he's there. He's a stud, and he's at the very least moved up substantially from where he was before. And by substantially, I mean like even if it's a few spots at the top is a big deal.
Okay, John, I'll let you have that one. I like Ibuka so much. We'll let it stand, right? Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, they're not going to put him back on the bench. Will his targets get eaten into? I mean, perhaps, right? Fleming has actually been pretty good this season, in addition to Marvin Harrison Jr. And like you said, JSN hopefully coming back, maybe not this coming week, but the week after. So there'll be competition, but he's already shown. I mean, he can put up with the best of them in that receiver room. They can't put him back on the bench. And yeah, he's great. I have him and Marvin Harrison Jr. very high, maybe 1 and 2 in that class as far as wide receivers go. So I think that's very fair at this point. So nice pick there with the 104. I'm having kind of a hard time with who I'm going to choose after this. I think that it drops off a little bit as far as guys who really are breaking out or rising. There's lots of great players out there that I could consider, but they're not necessarily big risers. So I wanted a guy who has skyrocketed from obscurity, like very, very low profile, to now he's getting a lot of attention and buzz. And that's Jaden Ott, California.
No.
Yes.
You took my boy.
You want to talk about big time run rate, John? This guy, he is explosive, right? And the team website has him at 205. I'm not totally sure about that. He still looks like he's maybe the 196 or so that he came in at. But honestly, it doesn't matter. I mean, if he's almost 200 pounds as a true freshman, he can easily put on another 10 at that rate. He has a tall enough frame where he can put on weight. And he's just big time plays, 11th in the nation in rushing yards, 8.3 yards per carry. So he's ripping off chunk plays. And he's even involved as a receiver. Like what else do you want? And this is for an offense that doesn't have this like super friendly scheme. It's not as though, he's just a system player. That's why I was always skeptical of him being a great C2C play and even Devy play. It's just like, who is Cal developing? Like, who are they putting to the NFL? Nobody. So yeah, that's my guy there at 105. I was happy to get him. And it seems as though I did take someone that you liked quite a bit too.
Yeah, I honestly didn't know where to put him. So I have him a couple spots below this just because I kind of thought maybe he would, I'd be able to sneak him in later on. But he was definitely pretty high up on my list. And for every reason that you said, true freshman, 10.7% big time run rate, even higher than what we just talked about. 1.3 PPR points per touch, which for a running back is very high. That's like Bijan, Travion levels. A small sample, but like he's there right now at least. 526 scrimmage yards, 6 touchdowns. He's doing it. He is doing it. And like you said, and not in the greatest offense, greatest team, or greatest scheme or anything like that. So very interested to see what he does, and I've moved him up substantially. He's up in the top 20 as well, just because I think how can you not? You have to, when somebody does that well that quickly, you have to move them up, and that'll bring us to. Oh, did you have something?
Yeah, all I was gonna say too is like you said, he's risen substantially, and if he's that high, I mean, think of the huge jump that he's made from, I don't know what his ADP was, like 400 up to top 20 back. Like that's insane. So I'm hoping that I got a steal there. Hopefully the listeners feel the same way. But yeah, let's hear your 106.
Yeah, I really did like that. And by the way, I just remembered I have Amika and Marvin Harrison back to back in the ranks, so I kind of was joking about having Amika higher, and I do. He's technically higher, but it's extremely close. So for my next one, I'm going to go with another player that I feel like has risen substantially, numerically, and that is Jalen Daniels out of Kansas. I think that, he went from basically nothing, like just 6.7 yards, adjusted yards per attempt, not a great interception rate, all that kind of stuff. He was completely off my radar for the most part. But I noticed something in our C2C league that I noticed like towards the end of the year, he started getting a little bit better last year. And so I kind of picked up on that. I ended up drafting him. And thank God I did, because not only, are me and you back to back first and second in that league, but he has a 71% completion rate, 890 passing yards, 11.5 adjusted yards per attempt, 11 touchdowns to 1 interception, and 38 rushing attempts for 326 yards and 4 touchdowns. So that is getting to that level of, the Lamars and stuff like that, where you are actually And I'm not trying to compare anyone to Lamar. I'm just saying like a very high level rusher, more so than a Drake May or somebody like that. So for fantasy purposes, it's going to be great. But I think he's done enough now to where he's going to be on NFL radars. He could easily move into the first round, and be that guy that people wanted Malik Willis to be, from last year, this past year, with the rushing talent, but actually having passing talent and passing abilities. I think that he was not on my actual like Devy radar before, but through 4 weeks, he is easily on my Devy radar, and he's moving up pretty damn quickly.
Yeah, another guy who has risen a lot. I would say that the attention that he's received to this point in the Devy C2C community, he needs more. I think it's warranted for him to see more attention. For a lot of people, they probably haven't even bumped him up the ranks much just because they still aren't paying attention to a Kansas quarterback. So like you said, the NFL is going to start paying attention, especially if he keeps this up, because he's been very efficient thus far, very good, TD to interception ratio. And I do wonder if he keeps up this level of efficiency. He's not doing it necessarily like a high volume standpoint. Not that there's anything wrong with the volume that he's seeing, but it'll be interesting to see how Kansas continues to support that and what kind of environment it's going to be for a young quarterback. But that was an excellent snag by you in the offseason, John, and that was even a guy I considered at the end of drafts too. So props to you for that, and I think that was a good selection there. And then I will go with my next guy. I don't know if this is a huge jump by any means. I know that some people liked him already a lot. I think you and I maybe were more hesitant, and I don't know how you stand now, but Marvin Mims, Oklahoma, that's a guy who I really do think that while it's maybe not jumping up again that much, maybe a round or so, but now it's actually warranted versus before it was like, well, this guy has potential, right? He flashed as a freshman and he let us down as a sophomore. So we really needed a big year for him to be a legit draft prospect. And I do think that this is the year. I mean, he's by far leading that receiving core in yardage and receptions as a share of that offense. And then he's 13th in the nation in receiving yards. And I mean, I understand that he hasn't been 100% the most consistent to this point in the season, but he's doing good things and enough where he could rise up in this wide receiver class that seems to be not faltering necessarily with its depth, but maybe not quite as amazing as everybody made that 2023 class out to be. So Marvin Mims, Oklahoma, is the guy that I'm selecting here at 107.
I like it. He was on my list. He's moved up substantially for me. And he's another one that has kind of played lower level competition so far. So, maybe there's question marks about like is it going to continue, that kind of thing. But, everything about what he's done so far is like a substantial leap from what he, did last year. Like you said, it was a down year. It's funny. Like, I feel like I always kind of pick on Parker Washington, but he, I don't know. He's in like his own tier, Parker Washington, and so I call it the Parker Washington tier, and that's where I had Mims before, was in that Parker Washington tier, and now he's up a lot closer to the top tier guys. I don't have him in that top tier, and maybe if they start playing some tougher opponents, maybe he comes back down to earth a little bit, but 400 scrimmage yards, 22.1 yards per reception, which is just, obviously, like, you don't want a guy just to be a deep threat, and I haven't done enough analysis to know if that's truly all he is. Maybe at 22 yards per reception, maybe he truly is, but man, like, that shows you the big playability of him. And then he 3 touchdowns so far, a 35.23% market share, and then 3.75 yards per team pass attempt so far this year. So, we know people lose their minds about the yards per team pass attempt, and there you go. It's that 3.7 range that people love to hear. So everything he's done so far has been elite this year. Not necessarily in the past, but if he keeps it up, he's going to be moving way up people's boards. And rightfully so. So I love that pick. Like I said, I definitely had him on the list here as well. So that'll bring us to my next player. Unfortunately, I try my best not to talk about the same players over and over again, but this is one that I feel is very warranted, and it's Blake Corum. Dude is showing out this season, and so at 108, I'm going to go ahead and take Blake Corum. 478 rushing yards, 7.5 yards per carry, 9 touchdowns, which is wild and will probably come down, but still pretty damn awesome. The next closest running back on the team is CJ Stokes with 112 rushing yards and 1 touchdown at a 4.9 yards per carry rate. And then Blake has a 12.1% big time run rate. So, comparing to some of the other guys, we were talking about how great Jaden Ott is at 10.7. You're just, going even above and beyond there. And what's even more important to me is they decided that Blake Corum is so damn good that they don't need Donovan Edwards. And so we know people were excited about Edwards, and rightfully so. I was excited about him too, just not as excited as I was about Blake Corum. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn here or anything, but like I said, Edwards isn't even getting on the field, much less actually doing anything. And Donovan Edwards has 15 rushes for 90 yards so far on the season. So, still good yards per carry and all that kind of stuff. But I just think that there was concerns about Corum's size, and there was concerns about Donovan Edwards taking his job. And at this point, if he keeps doing what he's doing, and with JJ McCarthy coming in, it seems like things have only gotten better for that offense and for him. I just think that it's going to be really tough for NFL teams to be like, oh, well, he's 5'8", so we don't want him.
That's it. I'm throwing the challenge flag here.
Oh, no.
Challenging the selection. No. So there's a couple things, because I think that your analysis on Corum is very good, but Donovan Edwards has missed the last 2 games. So that is directly responsible, or at least we see that correlation directly with Corum's spike. Corum was 16 points per game as far as fantasy production before Donovan Edwards got hurt. And then now, excuse me. Now, that's a good one, huh?
Well, while you're collecting yourself, what wasn't Edwards kind of partially benched though before he got hurt? I mean, he wasn't doing much. He wasn't getting receiving a lot of touches before he got hurt.
Yeah, I didn't do a direct comparison, I guess, between the two players. I would say that Corum was more of the 1A, but it was truly a 1A, 1B. It wasn't Corum was 1. Edwards was just, he was a backup in garbage time. So very much still a split. And I don't even think that's a negative on Corum. I just think that it still supports that he obviously has good competition with Donovan Edwards. And so I do think that that's kind of the caveat that people will have to determine, is Corum a good selection here, just because of the fact that, his breakout is only, I shouldn't say only, but primarily because of Donovan Edwards' absence the last 2 games. He's doing well before. It's not that he's a bad player, just more so for the breakout or riser. How much of that is actually because Corum's just taking it to another level, because he was good last year and he continues to be good this year. So maybe we can let that one stand or put an asterisk next to it. I don't know how you want to do that, but that's kind of my weigh in on Corum.
No, and I agree. I just think that people were kind of out, and now I don't think you can be out anymore, if you were. So I think that's why I wanted to put him on the list. Obviously, I didn't want to put him up too high because I think that would be unfair. But I think that around this area is deserved, just because, at what point do you go, okay, the guy has 500 yards, 9 touchdowns, and is just killing it through 4 games, and people were concerned that he wasn't even going to be the 1A, much less what he's doing right now. So I get the concerns with the pick, but I love me some Corum, so I guess I just had to talk about him.
That's fair. Well, how about a deeper one here at 109? And I shouldn't even say deeper. He needs to be on Devy players' radars, and I don't know that he necessarily was being drafted in that many leagues, unless it was deep before, for the Devy standpoint. This guy's been very much drafted in C2C leagues, and he's...
Oh, no, don't take my guy. I think
Jacob Cohen.
No, it's my next. It's literally the next guy on my list.
Man, I was just giving some teasers out there. Didn't know if you'd catch on.
As soon as you said maybe not for Devy purposes, I was like, oh man, he's taking my guy.
I mean, Coing's always done it. It's just a matter of, was he doing it at a high enough level, and he's doing it at Arizona now. So that bump up in level of competition, and he's been playing well. I don't know. I'm not going to go too in depth with him, but the film seems to check out as far as he's a solid player. Is he going to be a first round wide receiver? I kind of doubt it. I don't know that he's that level. But as far as a riser goes, I mean, going from Devy or little Devy relevance to maybe day 2 draft capital this coming year, that is significant in my opinion. So I do think that, this somewhat of a breakout, or at least he's getting more recognition now, warrants him as a selection here.
Yeah, literally next on my list, 386 scrimmage yards, 13.8 yards per reception, 6 touchdowns, and a 32.03% market share so far this season. He had an insane 47% market share, 47% market share last year, but obviously small school, that's kind of to be expected, but we saw big things from him and the potential for big things from him. And now he's doing it at a much higher level, albeit not the top level or anything, but still good enough to where, you love to see numbers like that. I agree with you. I don't think he's going to be a first round pick by any means, but I definitely think he can kind of be in that next tier, like the day 2 guys, that you end up falling in love with in the second round of your rookie drafts, like that kind of thing. Especially with the talent and everything in this class, I highly doubt he's going to end up being a first round pick in 2023 drafts.
Right. I agree with that.
All right, so this is definitely getting more difficult now. I have some names here, and in fact, I have about 8 names left, and we only have 3 picks left. So I feel like I need to be really, I need to win this thing. So I have to be strategic here about who I pick, because I need people to vote for me. And so I had Jaden Daniels on the list, but I don't think he's going to get the votes that I want. I really don't. As much as I like him, I don't think everyone else appreciates him like I do. I had Marvin Mims. Unfortunately, you took him. I think I'm going to go with, oh man, this is tough. I'm going to go with JJ McCarthy. I think that this is where, I just got done talking about his running back and how I feel like they're working in symbiosis or whatever to make everything better in the offense. We saw, we talked about Cade McNamara is not the answer there, and we said that in the offseason, but unfortunately we didn't think that JJ was going to get on the field right away, or we didn't know how quickly he was going to get on the field. Well, he's on the field, and he's not just a running quarterback. He can throw, and he's doing pretty nice things, albeit in a small sample. I hate saying that over and over again, but we have to caveat a little bit. So 80% completion rate, which is going to come down, but that's where it is right now. 693 passing yards, which is pretty impressive considering he's only played 2 games, 3 games maybe. So 13.2 adjusted yards per attempt, 5 touchdowns to 0 interceptions, 12 attempts, rushing attempts for 78 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. Those are pretty damn good numbers for a young QB just coming in and starting out, and I feel like things are only going to be going up for JJ. If anyone had doubts about can he be a passer, because all they used him as was basically a running back last year, I think he's answered those questions. Maybe he's not going to be the best passer in the league or anything like that, but I think he can definitely get the job done. And honestly, that 13.2 adjusted yards per attempt is pretty damn elite. I don't know if it'll stay there, but I love, obviously, 5 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. That kind of touchdown to interception rate is also elite. I hope it can continue like that. But I love me some JJ here at 110.
Yeah, good selection. No pushback from me there. 111. So my last pick of this risers, breakouts, whatever you want to consider this draft. And I did struggle again. Like you said, there's some tough decisions to be made here. And I didn't want to go with somebody obvious. So I think it's safe that we don't include guys like Nicholas Singleton in this because, I mean, he was already very high. He's flashed, so he's staying at that level, but he hasn't necessarily broken out or risen significantly. So, I'm not going to put him out there and try to sway Twitter votes with that and things like that. So I don't want to do that. And same with, Luther Burden hasn't necessarily done that much of a breakout either. He's flashed, right? So a couple of those guys I will not put in. And I forget there was one other kind of bigger name. Oh yeah, Jordan Addison, USC wide receiver. Um, you know, we could have included him here. That would be very fair. But again, he was already very highly ranked. For a lot of people, he was top 3, top 5 range in this wide receiver class, and he's still there. I'm going to go a little bit deeper. Guy who might now be pretty Devy relevant as far as maybe a day 2 draft capital guy, Rashee Rice, wide receiver, SMU, and somebody not necessarily on radars for that purpose this offseason. He was more of a CFF, C2C type of guy, a very, very good sleeper coming into the season. One that I'm sad I didn't get my hands on in leagues, or at least the one draft, that the startup that we did this offseason together. But he's first in the nation in receiving yards, and he's third in the whole nation in receptions. And I get it. This offense likes to throw the ball. But, I mean, the next closest guy on his team has 12 receptions. Rashee Rice has 34 receptions. I mean, that share is ridiculous. And if you go back at Rashee Rice's career, he has production all the way going back to early career. Like as a true freshman in 2019, he had 400 yards. And he's always been solid. I know he's kind of had the ups and downs, and he's had some competition there. So while we can't excuse that completely, what he's doing this year really stands out. I mean, he's almost met his career best in 4 games in. So for receiving yards. So making a huge impact this season. Rashee Rice, definitely somebody who checks out on film. Very, very impressive. So I think Brandon Lejeune, friend of the show, has put out some game film on him. I know he has in the past, and I believe he has some updated stuff. So would recommend people checking that out. But Rashee Rice is my pick here at 111.
I like it. It's hard to argue a guy that's leading the nation in all these categories and everything. I mean, obviously it's an American Conference player, so it's hard to get too excited about him. But we've seen some small school guys, get picked fairly early so far in in the past couple of years. So it's not that insane to think that he could get day 2 draft capital, and and people start getting really excited about him like they did with like a Sky Moore or even like a Jalen Tolbert or somebody like that. So I think that we can definitely see that ascension. I don't know that I believe in him, but that doesn't mean that he hasn't risen in up the ranks and in value at the very least. I mean, like you said, he's almost matched his career best through 4 games. So that's definitely starting up things off right. And he could move up even in my ranks when it's all said and done. I haven't truly paid attention to him in the ranks because I heavily discount those small school guys. So not to say that he can't show up, but I try my best not to have too many of the small school guys show up in my ranks because, how often do they actually get drafted that early? But he definitely could be one that does. And now for my last pick, I had a couple guys left that I want to talk about. Zay Flowers, which I've talked about over and over again, so I'm not going to pick him, but he was definitely on the list. Braylon Allen was another one. Not to say that like he's moved up substantially, but I feel like if people had any concerns, he's probably squashed those concerns. Now he's still not doing the receiving work or anything like that, but that's probably just not going to be his game. And but you just have to appreciate the talent of who he is as a running back. And look at a guy like Nick Chubb or Derrick Henry, and it can still work. Nick Chubb's leading all of fantasy right now. So if you think that you have to catch the ball to be a top back, then I definitely will disagree with you. Although most of the time it is that way. I think he can be a difference maker though. Bo Collins was another one on my list that I thought is he was already fairly high, but I think we're seeing it happen. So I liked him, and then Audric Estime that I love my baby Estime there, but those are not my picks. I'm just the people on the list that I consider talking about. Estime is looking though. The past couple of games have been exciting. Aaron and I have gone back and forth about if it's going to continue or not. We will have to wait and see But that's why I'm not listing him just yet. Give it another game or two, and you better believe I'm drafting him next time.
We
But
gotta put some money. We gotta put some money down on that sometime soon. Just a small little bit. It'll be interesting to see maybe who's like the starter in the next. I don't know. It's so tough to make those types of bets because it
yeah,
all revolves around health, right? Uh,
exactly,
and the coach's decision. But
exactly.
go ahead and hit us with your guy here, John.
So my guy is a name that was not very well known. At least I definitely didn't know him earlier in the season or in the off season. And he was a junior college transfer, and now he's blowing up. And it's Cam Camper, and he has 418 scrimmage yards, 1 touchdown, 7 yards per reception, and a 35.7% market share. And those are all things that I love to see, but like I said, I didn't really know much about him because he was a junior college transfer when when he went to Indiana. But I love anytime you can have a 35% or anything in that 30% 40% range, anything like that. Those are like elite market shares, and market share is not the only thing. But he has he has the production as well. The 400 yards, 1 touchdown, not the greatest. The PPR points per touch isn't the greatest, but we're talking about a guy that was basically not on radars and now has to be on radar. So it's a Big Ten school. We're not talking about small school here or anything like that. Playing pretty good competition and everything. I think that I'm pretty happy with picking Cam Camper here as my 112.
Yeah, he was not a guy necessarily on my radar for this. And you know what? That's probably more on me than anything bad about him. He's done some good things to start off this year. I don't know if he's for real. I really have not watched his film. Like you said, he's a guy who's come out of really nowhere. So very much a riser, right? He's risen from zero to at least being relevant. Now, we're going to need to see a lot more out of him before anybody should draft him in Devy. But at the same time, as far as this 4-game sample size goes, completely fair selection there. So nice job, capping off that first round for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to go a little bit deeper with that one. Like you said, he went from nothing to least relevant. So I feel like that's a pretty substantial rise there. And I mean they've played Illinois and Cincinnati and I mean Western Kentucky, but they played decent schools. So like it can't all be just nothing. And my wife is calling me real quick, so why don't you go ahead and explain what we're gonna do with the fallers, and I'll be right back.
Yeah, I'd be happy to explain that. And just to kind of cap off that previous section too, there were other selections or other, let's say, candidates for selections that I would have considered. Ally Jennings, Old Dominion wide receiver, who's second in the nation in yards, and I mean he's just dominating. He really dominated down the stretch last season, and now he's just showing that he is this very dominant wide receiver. Evan Hall, Northwestern running back, who has a really, really strong start to the season with rushing and receiving. Not sure that he's necessarily this great NFL prospect, but again, a day 2 consideration, as a lot of these guys are. So Evan Hall was another guy I was considering. Jalen McMillan, Washington. I don't know that he's really separated enough within that offense to be the guy or to be worthy on this list as far as a quote-unquote breakout, but he's finally putting some production on the field, which he hasn't really done to this point. So those were additional guys I considered, in addition to maybe some young guys like Barian Brown and Dane Key from Kentucky. Those were additional guys I was considering. But like John said, we have more. We have the risers, the breakouts draft, but we also have the opposite. We have the bust draft. We have the fallers draft from so far this season. And this is not to say don't get upset if your favorite guy's on this list. He can still come back. But to this point, just some of the biggest face planters, I guess, if you will. Maybe that's not the term that we need to be using, but the fallers here. Do you want to go first, John? I know I went first on the risers. Up to you if you want to keep it the same, mix it up. What do you want?
No, let's mix it up. I'll go 101 here. Just so everyone knows, my wife my wife knows that I'm recording here. She called me to let me know that my her friend's Lincoln Aviator that she just bought has massaging seats and was giving her a great massage. So that's the important call that I just received. She also went to a wine bar, so she's probably feeling a little good right now. But yeah, so I'm back, and let's go ahead and start with the 101. I think this one is pretty obvious whether people want to admit it or not, because I've heard quite a few people kind of just avoiding it altogether. It's Keishawn Butte. I think he has to be the 101 of fallers. I know there's question marks about his desire to play, and should he have opted out and all that kind of stuff. I'm sorry, I don't care. If you're on the field and you look like he does right now, it doesn't matter at that point to me. Now, maybe NFL scouts can be like, can talk to him and he'll just be like, look, I just didn't give a shit. Like, whatever, maybe he can convince him, but I'm not convinced right now, because through 4 games, he has 134 scrimmage yards, 0 touchdowns, 9.3 yards per reception, and 8.07% market share. 8% market share. We just got done talking about Cam Camper's 35.7%. Maybe we need to move Cam Camper above Keishawn Butte, but no, market share is not everything, but it is important. And so I think, when you have Malik Neighbors doing, pretty nice things in the same offense, you can't even just blame Jaden Daniels or anything like that. You have to say, okay, something is up with Keishawn Butte. Is it a health concern? Is it a desire concern? Does he not give a shit? Whatever it is, something's not right. But I feel like he probably would have been better off opting out at this point. And even if you still consider him a top guy in the 2023 draft class, which is perfectly fine, I get it. I've expressed concerns on the Full Tilt Devy pod about how it's kind of like a mirage, what he's done so far in his career, because he looked great filling in for Terrace Marshall Jr. after he got hurt his freshman season, and he basically did everything that Terrace Marshall Jr. did. But we now know that Terrace Marshall Jr. is terrible. So back then it seemed like a big deal. Now maybe it was just the way the offense was working, and I don't know that part's as exciting. And then he comes in, he only plays 6 games, in the 2021 season, and then he gets hurt. And then, it looks really good. Like, he really stood out. Well, we've seen some of these small sample games or small samples, like they're playing games against lower level talent. And so the first 6 games is probably not the same as the last 6 games, when it's all said and done. So I'm not trying to discount him completely or say he's terrible or anything like that. I don't believe that. I think he was overhyped. And I think that we're seeing it, whether it is from the injury or whatever, but he's just not looked good. I mean, it's just people expect him to be, or people are still talking about him being like a top 5 wide receiver in this class. And I'm sorry, I can't do it right now.
Yeah, so he should be a bust or a faller. I don't think a lot of people are considering that, or they're not looking at it and actually reacting yet. And they might be a little bit late to react, because I think that there is a reaction that's warranted on our end. Now, if you look at everything that he's done up until this year, it's very much indicated that he's a good player. So I will, I guess, kind of caution as far as calling him like the biggest bust. The door is not closed. It's, kind of maybe halfway. It could swing either way. Maybe it'll come out that he's just been playing hurt, right? He came off of this kind of mysterious ankle surgery that had, 2 separate surgeries, it seemed, and it's just kind of mysterious. And with this Brian Kelly hire, I mean, I don't think things are going that well at LSU. Like, I mean, there's some players who are doing well, but and Malik Neighbors, not to take away from him, he's a good player. Brian Thomas, some of those guys are talented wide receiver recruits at LSU, so they're getting by without Butte, but I'm still convinced that he's the best player there from that wide receiver core, but there's just something going on. So you're right. He has to fall, and he's worthy of this selection because he was at the top, him and JSN, the top dogs. And now I have Addison ahead for sure. I mean, it's very reasonable for a guy who's actually dominating this year to move him ahead of Butte, where we don't know where he's going to be at in his future. So my 102 that I'll make. I kind of went back and forth amongst a couple of guys. I'm going to steal a guy that I know that you would consider a faller or a bust, especially considering where the community had him this offseason. That's Anthony Richardson, Florida. He has to. Yes, and not that I'm not cheering for this whatsoever. So I want to make that clear to the listeners. We have never had any sort of agenda out for Anthony Richardson. It's just been more so like when you put on, when you analyze the numbers, and even when you kind of try to figure out, like, why is this guy being considered this almost complete flawless type of prospect, or at least has that potential when he's still so raw. We couldn't really figure it out, the hype for him. So he's definitely a faller, though. Just because we were low on him doesn't mean everybody else was. He was, top 3 quarterback, or I would say he was the number 3 quarterback for a ton of people in the community, a ton of drafters this season, and he's not living up to that whatsoever. So blame the system, blame this or that. He just hasn't quite lived up to it. So that's my 102, Anthony Richardson.
He was my 103, so you didn't quite steal him, but he was definitely right there. And I'm never like rooting against a player like you said, but I'm rooting for I was excited because it's when you hear so many people tell you you're crazy because you don't like Anthony Richardson, that it starts getting to the point where you do feel like an animosity, for the player and everything. I don't want him to fail, but when you see something a certain way and people tell you you're insane for it, it just feels like you have to start like defending yourself and you get backed into a corner kind of deal. And I just never saw it with Anthony Richardson. Like some guys it's the Malik Willis thing all over again. Like some guys just can't pass, and you have to be able to pass a little bit. You can't get by with just running. And the thing is, he's not even running all that much or all that well. So you can't even go, well, yeah, but he's going to have 2,000 yards rushing this year or anything like that. So he has 2 passing touchdowns to 5 passing interceptions. So like that shows you the passing prowess right there. Now he does have 5 rushing touchdowns. So, like we know he's a big boy. He's fast, like he's athletic. We know that that's part of his game, but it's not going to be enough. I really do. You've touched on it before, and other people have as well, but I really do think he's going to be a 2024 player at this point. And that right there immediately, even if you take out everything else, just him going from 2023 to 2024 has to drop him in the ranks. And then when you consider the terrible play, the 53.7% completion rate, the 5.7 adjusted yards per attempt, the 2 touchdowns, the 5 interceptions, all that kind of stuff, you have to knock him down. I already was very low, but we're not talking about our ranks, like you said. We're talking about everyone's ranks. We're talking about the Devy community here, and they had him very high. And I don't think, when it's all said and done, no one can have him at 3 anymore in the class. Like, it's just not possible. So he's definitely dropped substantially. But I think I'll move on to my 102. You did not take him. And it's another player that was creeping up. I mean, I heard people talking about him being possibly the wide receiver 2 in the class. And there it is. I finally stole one. It's Quentin Johnston. He's gone. Aaron left the show. But it's Quentin Johnston. People were talking about him being, literally possibly the wide receiver 2 in the class. Obviously with Keishawn Butte being an unknown at that point and everything. But I kept saying like, this is crazy. I don't see it. Like he's good, but he's not that good. And then he's not even good anymore. He's just like, he's non-existent. You can't even call him good, bad, or whatever. He's literally non-existent. He has 73 scrimmage yards through 4 games, 0 touchdowns, 9.1 yards per reception, and an 8.26% market share. You can blame the offense. You can blame whatever the hell you want to. It doesn't matter. There's bad offenses with players that I like. They only get 40 yards receiving in a game, but the QB only throws 120, so it still looks great, and so even if you want to try and blame the offense, he's not getting the share of the offense. And if he was that damn good, he would at least be getting something respectable. 8% is not respectable. That is just downright terrible. I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but I said that he was going to lose value at the beginning of the season, and here we are. He's not only lost value, I believe he's one of the biggest fallers of the draft.
Yeah, you sniped me. I agree with you there. Unfortunately, it's just been a tough start. 3 games in, but the production's not been there. So definitely moving down for me. He's on that fallers list, and rightfully very high up on that list. There were a couple different directions I could have went with this next selection. Probably a guy who's fallen from potentially the QB3 in the class to very far down. Maybe he didn't have quite the same level of hype, but Tyler Van Dyke, Miami. Uh, it's too bad, but I mean his QBR is 92nd in the nation. He has 4 touchdown passes and 3 picks. I mean, he's just not completing passes at a high rate, and unfortunately, there could be a quarterback change there in Miami, and there's always growing pains with new coaching staff um, hires, and maybe this is that taking place. But I don't know. Maybe there's a chance that he is benched. I mean, we know that Tyler Van Dyke was the 3rd string quarterback this last year, and via injuries, opportunities coming his way, he got his foot in the door. He did flash last year. It's not that he was this terrible quarterback by any means. He was good last year, but this year is just not happening. So Tyler Van Dyke is my selection here at 104.
It was my next pick, unfortunately. I hate to say it because I had him as my 3rd QB, albeit in a very much lower tier than the top 2 guys. But no one was standing out, and I knew it wasn't Anthony Richardson. And so Van Dyke had a great game or great season last year, and I just saw great things. It was only 1 year, and then they got a scheme change, and unfortunately they've lost everyone. They lost their starting receiver, and so I don't even know if it's necessarily all Van Dyke's fault. Like, I think he's still a good talent, but as bad as they're playing right now, I don't think it's going to truly matter. The NFL looks at that kind of stuff and goes, well, that's just a terrible offense. Why the hell are we going to draft this guy? Or at least draft him early. He'll probably still be drafted, but if he's a 5th-round pick or whatever, how much are we going to care? So that's the only thing I'm concerned about at this point. Maybe he can take a step forward and things can get better, but man, after I'm trying to remember his name. What the hell was the receiver's name that is out now? He's out indefinitely with like a foot injury, and like he was their starter, he was their top receiver, and so it's just like it was already bad, and then things got much worse. So I don't have high hopes that he's going to get better or things are going to get better anytime soon. But yeah, that was a good pick. He was next on my list. I'm now realizing because I only put 8 guys on my list, and you've already taken 2 of them. So I'm now realizing that we might have a little bit of an issue here, but I'll try and scrounge some up here. My next player was a pretty highly touted player after he transferred. I just he went to Alabama, and people started losing their minds. But Jermaine Burton, starting out the season, has not looked, or he's definitely not done what people expected him to do, and not taken that step forward. Now things did look a little bit better. Oh, were you gonna say something?
No. I was just gonna say, John, if you keep taking my guys, I'll keep taking yours. All right.
There we go. I love it. It's not all doom and gloom for Burton, and maybe honestly the offense in general hasn't looked amazing, so maybe it's not all Burton's fault. That's why I didn't have him at 101 or anything like that. But just for where people had him, once again, like a top 5 receiver in the class, like that kind of thing, you can't have him there anymore. Or you can't even have him close to that. I don't think. 155 scrimmage yards, 2 touchdowns, 12.9 yards per reception, and a 13.72% market share. Alabama helps. Having having that A on your helmet definitely helps, but I don't know it's going to help that much when he's all said and done. So he has to take a pretty big step forward for the rest of the season for me to be any kind of excited about him. And honestly, you know me, I hate tooting my own horn, but I always said I didn't really believe in him as a talent. It was more that he got a boost because he was going to Alabama, and I did it. I boosted him in my ranks as well, but I'm kind of mad at myself for even doing it. So I think that he is a pretty damn big faller so far through 4 games.
Yeah, he has to fall. I do think that our process was still fine. It was understandable, at least, especially with Bryce Young still there. It's not like they were going to some unknown quarterback. Like, I mean, next year there will be some unknown at Alabama unless something crazy happens. So I think it was fair process, but he has to fall here, right? Um, there is a bright side that, I mean, this last week he started playing a little bit better. He was a heavily utilized red zone weapon in week 1, but it's just been too far too. I mean, just he hasn't been doing what he needs to. Ja'Cory Brooks, we both like him. We both agreed that Ja'Cory Brooks needs to be their number 1, and that's starting to happen, which is exciting. But that's a side note. Jermaine Burton, there's opportunity for him still to be the number 2. So he's going to fall. How much are people actually going to move him down, though? I don't know, because this wide receiver class, there's only so many guys who truly are catapulting into, maybe like that top 3 to 5 wide receivers. So I'm fine with the selection there. Like I said, he was one of the guys on my list. So nice job stealing him. Maybe I'll take another guy here that we both kind of liked, Tyler Buckner, Notre Dame quarterback, and he has to. I mean, he's played just a handful of games in the last like 5 years. He had the one season, and then he's set, or maybe it was 4 years, but he's just sat out so much time, and now he's gonna lose another season after starting really poorly. 0 touchdowns in his first 2 games and 2 interceptions, and just not really getting it done either. I mean, I didn't expect them to win against Ohio State, but Marshall, come on. They were struggling. The offense is still kind of struggling, but they're actually looking like they're turning it around. And I do have some concerns with Tyler Buckner as far as his value goes. So right now, and I've heard other podcasts say, do we drop him from like C to C rosters, Devy rosters? I'm like, that's too big of a step, but he's falling considerably for sure, just because we haven't seen it in so long. And does Notre Dame develop good NFL quarterbacks? Not recently. We don't know what this new coaching staff will do, and I just don't know about if he played in a C2C league, is he going to actually be super productive either? Not sure. So that's my pick here at 106.
Yeah, unfortunately, he wasn't on my list, but probably just because I'm holding out hope that he'll actually do something at some point for my C2C team. I really thought that things were looking good for him at Notre Dame. Like the offense was going to be good. He has good pieces around him, and I guess when I honestly didn't even know all that about like his injury history and everything, in high school. But that's even more concerning now. So that's thanks for ruining my night. But I'll go ahead and dive into my 107 here. And this is a player that I never liked, never cared about. But I heard his name way too much this offseason to not have him as a faller, and it's Cameron Ward. I think that people have to understand that FCS and FES are not the same thing. Like they're just not even close. It's apples and oranges. And just because a guy looks really good in FCS doesn't mean that he's going to translate over to the higher college programs. And definitely not to the NFL. It's rare. I'm not saying it can't happen. It's just so rare that we have to take these big performances in FCS with a grain of salt. Now, maybe if it's like insane performances, then maybe we can go wild. But, just now remember, he moved up to the Pac-12. So I'm not even saying like his numbers look terrible or anything through all these weeks. He's still averaging 325 passing yards a game and everything, but 66.8% completion rate, but he has a 3% interception rate, which is really high, especially in the Pac-12 where, we're not talking about the best defenses here or anything like that. He's not much of a rusher, 1.3 yards per carry, and then his adjusted yards per attempt in the Pac-12, where I would expect it normally for a good QB to be fairly high, 10, 11, 12, whatever. His adjusted yards per attempt is 7.8. It's just not what I want to see from a QB. And I just don't know that you can really look at those numbers. And his passer rating is 128.6, which is pretty damn low. Once again for the Pac-12. So people were talking about him possibly being like a top 5 QB in the class and like all this other stuff. And I haven't seen anything that leads me to believe that right now.
Yeah, good call there. And like you said, not somebody that either one of us was ever touting or high on, but definitely has fallen. It was highly variable where he was going in drafts in this offseason, and definitely more of a C to C play. But yeah, he has to fall, right? Whatever his Devy ADP was, it's going down, that's for sure. So next up, I've picked a lot of quarterbacks so far. I think exclusively quarterbacks now that I think about it. I'm going away from that position. There's other positions that are falling, of course. This one, I don't feel great, and that's why I didn't select him at the top of the draft. I had to wait a little bit because his fall, it's slight, but it's significant enough that we should notice, and it's Xavier Worthy, Texas wide receiver. And to be honest, I am not moving him down like significantly. It's not like he's dropping 4 tiers. He's not going from wide receiver 1 to wide receiver 20. No, it's a slight drop, but it's enough where he's getting some guys passing him up. Marvin Harrison Jr., Mecca Ibuka, clearly above him in my opinion. And for me, that's a big value loss, I guess, if guys who were drafted in the 3rd round are now passing up your 1st round startup pick type of wide receiver. So now let's not completely panic. When I introduced this section, I said these guys can still bounce back, and I expect some sort of bounce back. But is Xavier Worthy, who's just this really undersized dude, he has a couple of red flags, or I mean, I shouldn't even call them red flags. They're like yellow flags. They're things that we kind of question a little bit. Xavier Worthy has a few of those now. He's 3rd on the team in receptions this year, 1 touchdown. And he's probably not fully healthy based on what I've seen or what I've heard, but he's still out there. So I don't know if this is just him playing through injury, but at this time, we have to bump him down a little bit, at least, in my opinion. So he's my probably controversial pick here.
I'll allow it. I think the only reason why I'm allowing it is because he's so small. I feel like when you're that small, you can't have red flags. He was. I was always higher than on him than most people, just because I don't really care about size and that kind of thing when it comes to wide receivers, whereas a lot of people do. So, I I was fine being higher on him, but he hasn't looked amazing. I will say, the caveat that Quinn Ewers, hasn't been available the entire season. So, like maybe things like my Jatavian Sanders shares need Quinn Ewers to be back as well. But Hudson Card's. I don't know why that was ever a debate whether it's going to be Ewers or Card there, but I guess that's college football for you.
Yeah. But their quarterback play was pretty bad last year, and Worthy looked just fine, right? He looked very good. So I just needed to have him take that next step forward, or at least continue what he was doing.
Right.
So um, I do think that you bring up some valid points, though, for sure. Like these small wide receivers, I'm not saying that that's a significant reason why he needs to fall. Just more so. He's just not getting it done quite yet. But I would allow a veto if you feel the need there.
No, I don't, because like I said, I really do believe that when you have those kind of question marks, like Devontae Smith, people were questioning if he could be an NFL wide receiver. I think those questions have been answered at this point, but we don't. Unfortunately, we don't have that crystal ball with Xavier Worthy here. But like we saw, he was amazing. He was small, but he was just amazing. He was, the first Heisman wide receiver, and God knows how long, and everything. So he needs to be at that level for him to stay that high for me when it comes to Worthy. And he had a 36% market share last year. He's at a 21.65% this year. So, and that's without Isaiah Nair, who we both loved. So I could maybe understand if Nair was there, but he's not. And so it just whether he's not healthy, whether it's Quinn Ewers not being healthy and things are going to change once he's back, I don't know. But through 4 games, I'm with you. Like, he has to drop a little bit. And when you're talking about, I had him, once again, I was very high on him. I had him as my wide receiver 2 overall, just because of what he did in his true freshman season. And he's already dropped at least a few spots for me. So, it's impossible to say that he, hasn't dropped or fallen at least a little bit there. And when you're talking about the top guys, a little bit is a lot. So I agree with you. I'm not going to veto that one. But I'm going to go ahead and talk about one of my own players from my C2C team. and I do not enjoy talking about this player at all. But things haven't looked great for Sean Tucker. I was very high on him, and I definitely wasn't the only one, but I just loved everything I saw in his profile. And I don't know if the offensive line is 10 times worse. The offense is, is actually doing pretty well. I mean, they're 4-0 as a team, so it's not like you can't blame the offense right now, which is weird because it's not like they were definitely not 4-0 last year, and yet he was doing pretty damn well. And then now this year he has 3.6 yards per carry. Now he has 483 scrimmage yards, 3 touchdowns. That all looks great through 4 games, but it's more volume based than it is, the actual play. And I hate that. Like I don't want the plotters. I don't want the Isaiah Spillers. I don't want the volume based players. I want the good players that get volume and then do a lot with it. And he's just not necessarily doing that right now. Now I will say he's been great in the receiving game. It's not all doom and gloom. He's still in my top 20 and all that kind of stuff. But he's dropped pretty substantially for me. And I love me some big time run rate. This season he has a 2.8% big time run rate. He's just not breaking big plays off. So I don't know, he ate too many cheeseburgers this offseason or what happened, but I just give me some big plays, Sean. Come on, because he had him last year. I got to go back and look what he did last year. He's not doing the same thing. What do you think?
Yeah, that's fair. And I was somebody who always questioned his speed somewhat. Some people have said speed is his best quality. I've never seen him as a guy who's really breaking that 4.48, 4.50 as far as a 40-yard dash. And then this year, yeah, he's not necessarily breaking those big plays. So he hasn't necessarily bulked up from everything I've seen. I just listened to a podcast. It might have been Chasing the Natty with those guys at C2C. And I'm pretty sure they said he's still at like 205. So it's not like he's this big guy who's rumbling, tumbling out there. I mean, he definitely needs to be quick and fast. And if he's lost any of that this offseason, that's an issue. So based on his play, I mean, he's definitely in consideration for falling. He's not. I haven't seen many people admit that yet. Just like the Boutte thing, like people on Twitter, they're not saying, "Oh, let's panic on Sean Tucker." They're still saying, similar to what they've said in the past with Tank Bigsby, "Oh, well, he's getting these volume stats. He's putting up enough numbers. He's fine. He's a good enough player." But like you said, you like to see something that sticks out, and right now Sean Tucker's not sticking out. So that's probably a good selection there, and I'm happy you included him. So that was 109. Then I was a little bit torn. Who do I put next? I'm going to say somebody who's really fallen off even more than he had already coming into the season. Arik Gilbert, tight end for Georgia. The guy, there's something going on there. And I've said that in the past, and I don't want to rag on him. I don't know him personally, but there's something that's just preventing him from getting on the field here. And it's not just this car accident he was in right at the start of the season. I know that probably cost him some time, but Gilbert, just an insanely talented tight end. I think everybody, I shouldn't say everybody. Most people probably thought he was the tight end 2 in this class if he was on the field, if he was actually playing and living up to that potential that he flashed as a true freshman, right away dominating in the SEC. So Gilbert's my selection here. Sad to see him fall, but he has to fall, right? I mean, there's so much uncertainty at this moment. You can't confidently trade for him. I mean, maybe you could if it's dirt cheap. Maybe I'll try that actually tonight. I just don't know that he's necessarily very valuable at this point, especially in a shallow Devy league. Oof.
Yeah, I'm just now getting into like tight end analysis and stuff like that. So I'd never even had them in the model before, but I figured out that I need to have them. So I'm trying to actually include them with the wide receivers, but that's not working out very well because tight ends don't produce the way wide receivers do, and that just makes it really difficult to like compare and contrast and everything. Like Brock Bowers looks amazing, and then the rest of them look terrible. So I need to probably just make their own model, which is annoying because it's just one more thing I have to update. But at some point I'll probably end up doing it just because I need to be able to talk about the Eric or Rick Gilberts and all that kind of stuff. And Yeah, I don't know much about him, but I know that people were talking about him being a top tight end, and I don't think you can really say that too much anymore. And then I guess let's see, we're at my last pick here. Oh man, I told you I ran out of players, so I'm looking through a list right now, trying to figure out a good one because I don't want to end on a low note. What do you got?
Well, only thing I was gonna say is that I know you are contractually obligated to bring up Tank Bigsby, but he hasn't necessarily fallen. You know, he's done the same thing he's done last season, so I'm not gonna let you get bailed out by choosing him here.
No,
Right, right.
you ruined it.
Yeah, he's almost identical to last season, so not really a flop or a bust, just
So he's just not good.
I mean, I would let you take Parker Washington. I know we mentioned him earlier. If you think that he's actually a faller, I know we talked about him kind of disappointing and moving down earlier.
I don't really. He's always been in that like 20, like wide receiver 25 range for me. Like he's good, but not that good. You know, it's just like it's. I didn't mention him earlier to say that he's terrible or anything like that. So I don't know that I actually believe that he's a faller. I think that's just who he is. He's that like good enough guy that might make an NFL squad or probably will make an NFL squad, but isn't going to be anything amazing. That's just how I feel about Parker Washington.
And that's fair. And I mean, to give people a sneak peek, I might choose him. You know, he was a guy I was considering at 112. So I mean, you can go with a different guy, but I do think that based on people actually drafting him in Devy leagues, that might be a wasted pick. Not saying he's trash. Not saying he's trash, right? Just more so that he's not going to be a difference maker. He's not going to be particularly explosive or versatile playing on the outside at the NFL level. He just has not separated from the competition at Penn State when the opportunity's now been there, despite his early career production. So solid player, just maybe not anything too special. And when you're investing in him in Devy leagues, even shallow ones, if he's getting drafted in the 4th, 5th, 6th rounds and he's not going to make an impact, though, that it kind of is a fall or a disappointment or a bust, if you will. So I guess to be decided if I pick him, but did you find a player here, John?
I did. Thank you for thank you for filibustering. But I went with Jackson Dart. I think that there was enough discussion about him being a top guy, and I never believed it. But the guy going over to an SEC school, maybe getting a little more in the limelight, like that kind of thing, and it's more of the same from what we saw before. I get that he was a great prospect and all that kind of stuff, but it's just I don't see it. And his numbers look, pretty close to what he was doing last year. And they've played Troy, Central, Arkansas, Georgia Tech, and Tulsa. Like those are the 4 teams that they've played so far. And he has 62% completion rate, 697 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. It's no, he does have 29 attempts and 200 rushing yards, so I mean, that's pretty nice. But I don't see him ever being an NFL QB. And people were talking about him possibly being, like there were so many QBs that were possibly being talked about, being like a top guy in this class, and he's just not going to be one. There's no way. I don't see it.
Okay, no, that's fair. He was a guy I was considering here. Let's say that. So I like it. At 112, I tricked him. I'm taking Tank Bigsby. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, no, please do. I guess I was already told I wasn't allowed to.
No. Enough Bigsby slander for today. I'll just call it Parker Washington. Right. I already made my case for him, and 16 receptions for 212 yards in his 4 games so far. Like, yuck. Yeah, I already covered that. Parker Washington, 112 to wrap up our list here.
Yeah, I've already talked about him too. It just he doesn't seem special. I get that people thought he was going to take the next step, and he just never did, and he's not doing it this year. So I think he's a good enough player to make the NFL, and I think that's really about it. Like you're probably we're probably never going to talk about him again once he picks the NFL, sadly, or it's going to be years. Like, guys like that, in my opinion, take a little bit, like 3-4 years, and then maybe you'll hear the Noah Browns of the world, the Cedric Wilsons of the world. I don't know why I'm only talking about Cowboys or former Cowboys, but like those players, like it takes them years, and then maybe they finally hit, but it's not going to be year one. He's not going to be Garrett Wilson out the gates or anything like that.
Right. And maybe he's Khalil Shakir, right? Who has some value, at least to some people out there, maybe in the pre-draft or post-draft process before they actually play. But guys like Shakir, low probability of them actually making meaningful impact for your dynasty rosters. So that's Washington. I did consider some other guys, a couple Alabama backs. Well, former back, Emmanuel Henderson. He is no longer at the running back position. He's going to be a wide receiver there. They have so much wide receiver talent. He will not make it, in my opinion. I
always said he was too small, and apparently I was right.
Yeah, right. They did not view him maybe as a guy who could either get big enough and or just run physically imposing enough. Maybe there was too much competition there, and they could use a slot wide receiver. I don't know what the case is. Good player, versatile player, but probably not going to be relevant. So he's definitely got to fall. I don't think he's draftable anymore. And then Tavion Thomas, Utah. He's been just kind of, I don't know, there's some stuff going on maybe off the field too, but he's been kind of an afterthought for Utah after having a very productive season. And then Trey Sanders, Alabama running back, who I guess maybe this was just more of a me thing, but I had held out some hope that he would be their number 2 back, and the guys behind him were actually pretty healthy. It seems that, why am I blanking on Jason McClellan and Roydell Williams, they're healthy and they kind of overtook him. So I got to take my L there, but those were other fallers, potential bust candidates I was going to mention.
Yeah, I was so high on Jason McClellan last year, and then I kind of gave up on him because he did nothing, and I kind of learned, I guess I learned my lesson about Alabama backs. Like, you probably shouldn't give up on them unless they just literally do nothing. Although, with Trey Sanders, it's been like 2 years. I know he had a pretty nasty injury, right? Like, didn't he get a car accident or something?
Yeah, his freshman season, I believe he missed the whole season due to a foot injury. I don't know if that was Liz Frank or some sort of ankle fracture. So there was something going on with the foot and ankle. And then after that, I think he got some run his second season. And then he had that bad car accident that you're referencing. Tried to work his way back from it last year, but still was not himself. And apparently he's still maybe not ever regained that athleticism that led to him being one of the best running back recruits ever, landed by Alabama, I believe. He was, I think, in the top 200 all time of any prospect at any position. So Trey Sanders, legit talent, but he's lost too much with his injuries, and he's going to need to transfer out to probably make it to the NFL.
Yeah, I'm not saying same injury or anything, but it kind of reminds me of like Kevin Harris, like where he was so good, and then he gets this terrible back injury, and he's just not the same. Goes undrafted and is on a practice squad right now. Because I had such high hopes for Kevin Harris, and it definitely doesn't seem like that's going to be a thing, and it probably going to be the same thing for Trey Sanders. But this was a lot of fun. We went a little bit longer than we normally do, but hopefully you guys enjoyed switching it up a little bit, doing the draft. I'm gonna put out the. I won't do it tonight because it's kind of late, but tomorrow we'll go ahead and put out our drafts. You guys can tell Aaron why he lost, and why he lost both. Of course, I started off with Kayshon Boutte in the Fallers draft. Like, you can't come back from that. Although you did take Anthony Richardson. Damn it. Okay. This is going to be close. This is going to be a lot closer than I was hoping for. But no, this is a lot of fun, Aaron. I'm glad you brought this up as an idea. And actually, I kind of hope that we can do this maybe once a month, once every 4 weeks or something like that. Just keep up with it and see if we agree. We can go back and look at our previous lists, and are they still falling? Are they still rising? And or vice versa, that kind of thing. So let's plan on doing that. Every other show or something like that, and that'll give us some good content, and we can. I think it's important to look at this kind of stuff because maybe we're wrong. Maybe everyone doesn't agree with us, like you said, with Anthony Richardson or with the Kayshon Boutte's. But I think it's good to start talking about that kind of stuff because they're falling for a reason, and so people don't always want to talk about it because they get like an idea in their head of who a player is, but this is college. This isn't the NFL. Like, nothing is set in stone by any means. And so we can't take these small samples and just run with them. We have to take every bit of information that we have and change and be malleable.
Yeah, we definitely have to change. I did see a discrepancy when I was at least looking for guys who are risers versus fallers. It was pretty easy to put together my fallers list. It was kind of hard for me to put my risers together. That's why we started selecting guys like Rashee Rice, Cam Camper, some of those guys who might have been maybe not big names and still aren't big names in Devy. But I think that goes to the point that you made about the sample size. We can only go off of so much, right? A couple hot games to start the season doesn't mean these guys are Devy studs. And we should also take that same consideration into the fallers. A bad 3 to 4 games to start the season does not doom these players. So let's follow up with this list later in the season and see how everything progresses. But like you said, a very fun exercise. So thanks for making this work, John. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I have so very much so enjoyed talking about all this stuff and actually like getting into Devy and C2C, and it's been great. Having players to root for has been amazing because it actually gives me something to root for. Actually watching college game, I was watching what game was it last week where I turned on. Oh man, I can't remember it, but I turned on a game. I was building a bed for my daughter, and I turned on a game in her bedroom while I was building this bed, and it was only to watch Xavier Hutchinson. That's all I cared about, was watching Xavier Hutchinson, and unfortunately, he didn't do a lot while I was while I was building the bed, but he actually did pretty well. It was actually one of his lower games. Unfortunately, I have him on my team, my C2C team, and so it was one of his lower games. I still won, by the way, but yeah, it's so much better when you have somebody to root for and get excited about and that kind of stuff. So I love that. We will be back as soon as possible to talk some more Devy. And as far as me, Aaron's always watching the film and looking at the stats and all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, I'm watching the games for fun. For the most part, I'm looking at the metrics and that's how I figure out who I like and all that kind of stuff. So every game that we get is just that much better. It's like exponentially better for me as we get that bigger sample size and everything. So I just updated for the first time this season my Devy ranks today. And so I updated every single Devy player, and I'm actually feeling pretty damn good about them. I added some players that I didn't have in there from before, maybe Cam Campers and Rashee Rice and whoever else, and did all that. But every week, I'm going to just get more info, and I'm just going to keep updating and all that. So I love to get all that kind of stuff. We appreciate you guys listening or watching, and we will be back as soon as possible. But for now, we're cashing out. Thanks, Aaron.